In 1943, a young woman named Marie-Claude Vaillant-Couturier walked into a Gestapo office in occupied Paris. Hidden in her coat was a radio transmitter. Discovery meant certain death. But as Nazi officers passed within inches of her, they never suspected this elegant French lady was actually part of a vast underground network that would help bring down Hitler's regime. From secret printing presses in attics to underground railroads, saving thousands of lives. This is the story of how ordinary people risked everything to resist occupation. Beneath the surface of every occupied city in World War II, an invisible army was at work. School teachers became saboteurs. Housewives transformed into spies. Teenagers acted as couriers, carrying messages that could change the course of battles. This was a resistance, not a single organization, but a complex web of networks that spread across Europe like roots beneath the soil. The scale was staggering. In France alone, by 1944, there were over 400,000 active resistance members. In Poland, the Home Army commanded nearly 400,000 sworn soldiers. But numbers only tell part of the story. These weren't traditional military units. They were civilians who maintained normal lives as their cover while conducting operations right under the enemy's nose. Take Lucie Aubrac, a French teacher who seemed to spend her days grading papers and teaching literature. But her real work began after dark. She orchestrated multiple prison breaks, including a daring rescue of her own husband. Using elaborate disguises and forged papers, she and her team freed dozens of resistance members from Nazi custody. These networks grew from humble beginnings. In the early days of occupation, resistance often meant simple acts of defiance. Painting V for Victory signs on walls, spreading news from banned Allied radio broadcasts, or helping soldiers left behind after Dunkirk. But as the war progressed, these scattered acts of rebellion evolved into sophisticated operations. The resistance networks operated like a secret city within each occupied city. There were divisions of labor, specialized roles, and strict security protocols. Some members never knew more than 2 or 3 others in the network, a security measure that ensured if one person was caught, they couldn't compromise the entire organization. In Norway, the resistance developed an ingenious system using everyday objects as signals. A flower pot in a window might indicate meeting tonight. A newspaper left on a park bench in a certain way could warn of German patrols. The simplest actions became part of an elaborate code that occupation forces never cracked. The diversity of resistance activities was enormous. Some groups focused on gathering intelligence, carefully documenting German troop movements and fortifications. Others specialized in sabotage. The rail war in France destroyed over 1,800 locomotives in 1944 alone. Many networks concentrated on saving lives, hiding Jews, downed Allied pilots, and other endangered persons. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect was how ordinary people adapted to extraordinary circumstances. Bakers hid messages in loaves of bread. Bicycle repair shops became weapons caches. Movie theaters served as meeting points, with resistance members using the darkness to pass messages and materials. Even children played their part. In Denmark, school children would deliberately make noise and create distractions while resistance members carried out operations nearby. Women played a crucial role in these networks. Their ability to move about without arousing suspicion made them ideal couriers and intelligence gatherers. In occupied Paris, female resistance members would flirt with German officers in cafes, memorizing snippets of conversation about troop movements and military plans. They exploited the enemy's own prejudices. Few German soldiers could imagine that the elegant lady at the next table was actually a skilled operative gathering critical intelligence. The resistance also developed sophisticated support systems. Safe houses were connected by elaborate routes that could be changed at a moment's notice. Forgers worked tirelessly to produce papers that could withstand increasingly rigorous German security checks. Medical networks were established to treat wounded members without risking exposure at regular hospitals. These underground armies proved that occupation forces could never truly control a population that refused to submit. Every act of resistance, from major sabotage operations to simple acts of defiance, helped to maintain hope and show that victory was possible. As one resistance member later wrote, "We might have been underground, but we never felt more free." In Belgium, the resistance turned the country's complex railway system into a weapon against the occupiers. Railway workers developed an intricate system of signals using track maintenance flags and lights. A red maintenance flag might actually indicate German ammunition train approaching, while a yellow light could mean security check ahead. This information network allowed saboteurs to strike at the most damaging moments, crippling German logistics without revealing their methods. The resistance also mastered the art of economic warfare. In occupied France, factory workers deliberately slowed production, made subtle manufacturing errors, or accidentally damaged vital equipment. At one aircraft factory outside Paris, resistance members managed to reduce production by 60%, while maintaining the appearance of normal operations. German inspectors never discovered why so many engines were mysteriously failing quality control. In the Netherlands, the resistance penetrated deep into the German administration. Dutch civil servants, forced to work under occupation authorities, became masters of bureaucratic sabotage. They would lose important papers, misfile crucial documents, or create endless administrative delays. One resistance member working in a transportation office managed to route dozens of German supply trains to the wrong destinations simply by changing a few numbers on routing forms. The underground army also became experts at psychological warfare. They spread rumors that demoralized German troops and created confusion among occupation authorities. In Copenhagen, resistance members once convinced local German units that a major Allied attack was imminent, causing them to waste valuable resources preparing for an invasion that never came. But freedom came at a terrible price. For every resistance member, staying alive meant mastering the art of deception. One wrong word, one misplaced glance, could mean death. And no one knew this better than Jean-Louis Cohen, a French banker who lived two lives. By day, he processed transactions for German officers with a pleasant smile. By night, he used his position to gather intelligence that would help bring down the Reich. His story shows just how far resistance members had to go to maintain their cover. Jean-Louis Cohen may have maintained his banker's facade, but survival meant becoming someone else entirely. The art of staying alive in the resistance meant mastering deception. Every member lived a double life, maintaining a carefully crafted normal identity while carrying out clandestine operations. The smallest mistake could be fatal. Using the wrong greeting, forgetting a detail of your cover story, or even walking with a military posture could attract unwanted attention. Communication between resistance cells was a masterclass in ingenuity. In the Netherlands, resistance members developed a system using the public library. Books would be marked with tiny pinpricks under certain letters, spelling out messages that seemed random to anyone else. The system was so effective that it operated for 2 years before the Germans even realized it existed. Safe houses were the backbone of resistance operations. These seemingly normal homes had hidden rooms, secret passages, and elaborate warning systems. In Brussels, one resistance safe house was built with a special floor that could be dissolved with chemicals. If the Gestapo raided the building, any incriminating documents would be destroyed within minutes. The resistance developed sophisticated codes that went far beyond simple substitution ciphers. In France, the music code used sheet music to transmit messages. Different musical notes represented letters or military units. Even if intercepted, the messages appeared to be nothing more than amateur compositions. Ingenuity extended to everyday objects. Clothing became a secret language. A yellow scarf might indicate danger, while rolled-up sleeves could signal a package needed to be collected. In Paris, laundresses developed a code using clotheslines. The arrangement of sheets and clothing items could warn of German patrols or signal that a safe house had been compromised. Radio operators faced particularly daunting challenges. The Germans had sophisticated direction-finding equipment that could locate transmitters within minutes. To survive, operators developed a hit-and-run system. They would set up their equipment, transmit for no more than 20 minutes, then quickly relocate. Many built hiding spots for their equipment in walls, floors, or even fake plumbing fixtures. Marie-Madeleine Fourcade, who ran France's largest spy network, developed an elaborate animal-based code system. Each agent was given an animal name, and locations were coded as different species. Through this Noah's Ark of codes, she managed to transmit detailed intelligence about German defenses that would prove crucial for the D-Day invasion. The resistance perfected the art of hiding in plain sight. Underground meetings were held in churches during actual services, with messages passed during communion. Bicycle repair shops became perfect cover operations. The constant stream of customers provided an excuse for people coming and going, while the noise of repair work masked the sound of radio transmitters. In Poland, resistance members created an underground postal system using the sewer networks. Specially trained sewer rats would navigate the underground tunnels, carrying messages and supplies between different parts of the city. The Germans never figured out how information was moving so quickly through supposedly isolated neighborhoods. Every resistance member had to become an actor, maintaining their cover story under intense pressure. They memorized elaborate backstories, practiced local dialects, and learned to control their reactions during German security checks. Some went so far as to deliberately cultivate friendships with German officers, playing a deadly game of deception at close range. The locations for secret meetings were chosen with meticulous care. Danish resistance members favored funeral homes. Germans were reluctant to disturb mourners, and comings and goings at all hours wouldn't raise suspicion. In Amsterdam, the resistance used canal tour boats, conducting meetings while appearing to be ordinary tourists. The constant engine noise made it impossible for eavesdroppers to hear conversations. Identity papers became a crucial battleground. German security forces constantly updated their documentation requirements, forcing resistance forgers to become increasingly sophisticated. In Belgium, a dentist named Loïs Lamaric used his knowledge of chemicals to develop new aging techniques for paper. He could make a document created yesterday look like it had been carried for years. His work became so renowned that resistance networks across Europe sought his expertise. The resistance also mastered the art of creating legends, complete false identities backed up by multiple forms of documentation. A single cover identity might include not just papers, but fake letters from family members, worn photographs, and even deliberately cultivated calluses on hands to match supposed occupations. Some operatives maintained multiple legends, switching identities as needed to evade detection. Security protocols were ruthlessly enforced. New members underwent extensive background checks and were often tested with fake security breaches to prove their reliability. In Norway, potential recruits were given false information. If that information appeared in German hands, the recruit was exposed as a collaborator. But maintaining these secrets came at an enormous psychological cost. Resistance members had to lie constantly to their neighbors, their co-workers, sometimes even their own families. They lived with the constant fear that one slip could doom not just themselves, but everyone they worked with. Many developed a kind of double consciousness, their real selves buried so deep they wondered if they would ever fully resurface. These elaborate deceptions weren't just about staying alive, they were about saving lives. As the Nazi persecution intensified, the resistance networks faced their greatest challenge: how to protect and evacuate thousands of endangered people right under the enemy's nose. And it would take someone like André de Jong, a young Belgian woman who seemed too innocent to suspect, to show just how powerful these networks could become. André de Jong's innocent appearance was her greatest weapon. The 24-year-old Belgian woman looked so young that German guards often treated her like a naive schoolgirl. They never suspected she was the architect of the Comet Line, one of the most successful escape networks of World War II. Under their very noses, she personally guided 118 Allied airmen to safety, leading them through occupied France and over the treacherous Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. The human smuggling networks of the resistance were engineering marvels of desperate times. The Comet Line alone helped over 800 Allied airmen escape occupied territory. The network stretched from Brussels to the Pyrenees Mountains, involving hundreds of people who each knew only their small part of the operation. Each escape was a carefully choreographed operation. Downed pilots would be given civilian clothes, forged papers, and detailed cover stories. They would be moved between safe houses, often traveling at night, learning to adapt local mannerisms to avoid detection. The smallest details mattered: wearing the right kind of buttons, using the correct slang, even walking in the local style. In Paris, resistance members developed an ingenious system using the city's vast network of bookshops. Allied aviators would be taught to browse books in a specific way that identified them to resistance members. Each bookshop became a link in an escape chain that could move a pilot across the city without risking direct contact between resistance cells. The resistance also mastered the art of hiding people in plain sight. Jewish children would be placed with non-Jewish families, given new names and identities. They learned Catholic prayers and customs to maintain their cover. In Belgium alone, thousands of Jewish children were saved through this network of protective families. In Denmark, the resistance orchestrated one of the war's most remarkable rescue operations. When the Nazis ordered the roundup of Danish Jews in 1943, an impromptu evacuation network sprang into action. In less than 3 weeks, they helped over 7,200 Jews escape to neutral Sweden. Fishing boats, cargo vessels, and even rowboats were pressed into service. The medical networks were equally impressive. Secret clinics were established in basements and attics, staffed by doctors and nurses who worked their regular hospital shifts by day and treated resistance members by night. They developed ingenious methods for securing medical supplies. In Paris, resistance members posed as hospital workers to divert shipments of bandages and medications. These underground hospitals became more sophisticated as the war progressed. Norwegian resistance doctors developed a system for performing emergency surgery using local anesthetics and minimal equipment. In Belgium, a network of veterinarians provided medical care in rural areas, disguising human patients as animal treatments in their records. The resistance also created elaborate systems for hiding people in plain sight. Dutch farmers built false walls in their barns, creating spaces that could hide dozens of people. Belgian coal miners converted abandoned shafts into underground shelters. In France, entire villages sometimes participated in hiding operations, with lookout systems that could quickly conceal evacuees during German patrols. One of the most innovative methods came from the French railway resistance. They developed a system of hiding refugees in specially modified train cars, complete with secret compartments and air vents. These ghost trains moved hundreds of people to safety, right under the noses of German transport police. The resistance understood that survival often depended on creating entire alternative communities. In Poland, they established underground schools, where Jewish children could continue their education while in hiding. Teachers would move between safe houses, carrying books and supplies in shopping bags or newspaper bundles. The rescue networks also developed sophisticated methods for moving money and supplies. Dutch resistance members created a shadow banking system, using a network of sympathetic businessmen to transfer funds between cities without leaving a paper trail. This financial underground became crucial for supporting families in hiding and funding escape operations. In Norway, the resistance perfected the art of moving people through remote mountain areas. Local guides, many of them experienced skiers and mountaineers, developed routes that avoided German patrols. They created supply caches in remote cabins and caves, ensuring that even if a group had to hide for days in the wilderness, they would have access to food and medical supplies. The resistance also established elaborate support systems for those they saved. Safe houses weren't just places to hide, they became temporary communities. Residents would teach each other languages, share skills, and help maintain morale. In Amsterdam, one attic hiding space became an impromptu school where a hidden university professor taught mathematics to fellow refugees. Urban escape routes required particular ingenuity. In Paris, the resistance mapped out routes through the ancient catacombs beneath the city. These underground passages became highways for moving people and supplies, complete with guide marks only resistance members could interpret. But saving lives required more than just hiding places and escape routes. It required winning the war of information. And as Marie-Claude Weber stepped into her role as editor of an underground newspaper, she was about to demonstrate how the power of the printed word could be just as devastating as any weapon. Marie-Claude Weber knew that every time her printing press rolled, it was an act of war. As editor of Combat, one of France's largest underground newspapers, she commanded an army armed with words. The resistance understood that information was as powerful as any weapon. Underground newspapers sprang up across occupied Europe, providing truth to counter Nazi propaganda. These weren't simple leaflets. Many were sophisticated publications with editorial teams, distribution networks, and dedicated printing presses. The technical challenges were enormous. Paper was strictly rationed, ink was scarce, and printing presses had to be hidden and soundproofed. In Amsterdam, one resistance printing operation worked from a canal house, using the water to muffle the sound of their press. They produced over 100,000 copies of their newspaper, using a distribution network that included everything from milk deliveries to funeral processions. Every stage of production was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Typesetters worked in shifts, often by candlelight to avoid drawing attention. The noise of printing presses had to be masked. Some groups operated during church services, timing the press runs to coincide with organ music. Others built underground rooms with sound-filled walls to deaden the sound. The resistance developed ingenious methods for acquiring supplies. They infiltrated paper factories, creating false orders that diverted materials to safe houses. Ink was manufactured in basement laboratories using formulas developed by resistance chemists. Some groups even managed to steal entire printing presses piece by piece, reassembling them in hidden locations. Distribution networks rivaled military operations in their complexity. Papers would be hidden inside legitimate publications, stuffed into grocery bags, or carried by children who could move about without arousing suspicion. In Brussels, resistance members created fake German newspapers. Inside the official-looking wrappers were resistance publications that could be read openly on public transportation. Intelligence gathering became a fine art. Resistance members posed as workers, servants, and maintenance staff, carefully documenting German military installations. In Norway, resistance agents mapped every detail of the heavy water plant at Vemork before its famous sabotage. Their intelligence was so accurate that Allied commanders initially thought it must be fake. No amateur network could be that thorough. The resistance also mastered psychological warfare through print. They would create counterfeit versions of German military orders, causing confusion and delays. False notices about food distribution would send German soldiers to non-existent locations. Some groups even managed to slip fake articles into legitimate German newspapers, undermining enemy morale. Document forgery reached new levels of sophistication. Resistance forgers didn't just copy existing papers. They had to create documents that could pass increasingly rigorous German security checks. They developed new inks, studied paper aging techniques, and even reproduced watermarks. One Polish forger became so skilled that his fake passports were actually better quality than the real ones. The resistance press also became masters of rapid response journalism. When the Germans would post new regulations or proclamations, counter notices would appear within hours, exposing lies or providing vital context. In Paris, one network maintained 3 separate printing locations. If one was discovered, the others could immediately increase production to maintain the flow of information. The art of coded messages in newspapers reached new heights. Resistance editors developed systems where seemingly innocent classified ads contained vital intelligence. A notice about selling fresh eggs might actually indicate incoming air raids, while piano lessons available could signal safe routes were compromised. Newspapers also served as crucial morale weapons. They published stories of successful resistance operations, news of Allied victories, and most importantly, evidence that they weren't alone in their struggle. Special editions were created for German soldiers, written in their own language, designed to sow doubt and encourage desertion. Some of the most effective operations combined multiple forms of information warfare. In Denmark, the resistance press coordinated with radio operators to create synchronized information campaigns. While newspapers would plant stories about German vulnerabilities, radio broadcasts would confirm these reports, creating the impression of widespread resistance success. The power of these paper warriors extended beyond immediate tactical advantages. Their newspapers maintained hope, provided crucial information about food and survival, and kept alive the spirit of resistance. They became the voice of occupied Europe, a reminder that the enemy's control was not complete. Many underground publications survived the war to become legitimate newspapers, their wartime reputation for truth and courage earning them devoted followings. The techniques they developed, from secure communication networks to methods of bypassing censorship, would influence resistance movements for generations to come. But the price of wielding the pen against the sword was steep. When Marie-Claude's printing operation was discovered in 1944, the Gestapo's response showed just how much they feared the power of truth. Her story would become one of many that illustrated the ultimate price of resistance. When the Gestapo discovered Marie-Claude's printing operation, they didn't just arrest her. They tortured her for days trying to uncover her network. Like thousands of other resistance members, she maintained her silence until the end. The price of resistance was steep. In France alone, around 20,000 resistance members were executed. Many more died in concentration camps or under torture, never revealing the secrets they protected with their lives. Yet for every resistance member captured, others stepped forward to take their place. The story of Noor Inayat Khan exemplifies this courage. An Indian princess turned British spy, she served as a radio operator in occupied Paris. When her network was betrayed, she refused to abandon her post, continuing to transmit vital intelligence while evading capture for 3 months. Even after her arrest, she remained defiant, orchestrating 3 escape attempts from prison. She never broke under interrogation, protecting her network until her execution at Dachau. The Germans' ruthless response to resistance activities showed just how much damage these networks were causing. Entire villages would be punished for single acts of resistance. In the French village of Oradour-Serglaine, SS troops massacred 642 civilians, including 247 children, in retaliation for resistance activities in the region. Yet these brutal reprisals often had the opposite effect, driving more people into the resistance. After each execution, new volunteers would step forward. When resistance leader Jean Moulin died under torture, refusing to reveal a single name, his example inspired thousands to join the fight. The resistance's medical networks paid a particularly heavy price. In Norway, an entire underground hospital was discovered, leading to the execution of 12 doctors and nurses. Yet within weeks, new medical facilities were operating in different locations. The Germans never managed to completely shut down these life-saving networks. Young resistance members showed extraordinary courage. In the Netherlands, teenage courier Freddy Overstegen carried messages and weapons while pretending to be a schoolgirl. When stopped by German patrols, she would flirt with the soldiers, all while carrying vital intelligence in her school bag. She survived the war, but many of her young comrades did not. The human cost wasn't just measured in deaths. Countless families were torn apart. Children lost parents to execution or deportation. Some resistance members spent years not knowing if their loved ones were alive or dead. The psychological scars would last generations. Women in the resistance faced particular dangers. If captured, they endured not just torture but sexual violence. Yet they continued to play crucial roles. In Italy, women couriers known as staffette carried messages and weapons across enemy lines. In Poland, women fighters played key roles in the Warsaw Uprising. The resistance networks left a lasting legacy beyond their military impact. They proved that ordinary people could stand up to tyranny. Their methods of organization and resistance influenced civil rights movements and freedom fighters around the world. The Danish resistance's successful evacuation of Jews showed that communities could protect their vulnerable members, even under the most extreme circumstances. Perhaps most importantly, it demonstrated that resistance isn't just about weapons and sabotage. It's about maintaining humanity in the face of brutality. Many resistance members risked their lives not to fight, but to save others, to preserve culture, to document atrocities, or simply to maintain hope. As one French resistance member wrote in his final letter before execution, "We fought not just against occupation, but for the kind of world we wanted to build after liberation. In the end, that's what made it worth any price." Today, the physical traces of these resistance networks have largely disappeared. The secret rooms have been renovated, the hidden printing presses removed, the safe houses converted to modern apartments. But their story remains a testament to human courage and ingenuity, and a reminder that the greatest strength often lies not in armies or weapons, but in the quiet determination of ordinary people who refuse to accept tyranny. If you love military history like I do, subscribe for more content like this.